Hey there. Thanks for tuning in. You ready for another episode of My Bigfoot Sighting? Alright then, let's do this.
Seen a bunch of rundown no-horse towns where the church is the backbone, love's in the plow, and the five-string melodies grooving, with the farmland rows where the roots run deep, beyond the noise of the busy streets, where the songs of the South are soothing. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah.
If you'd like to be able to listen to the show without ads and have full access to bonus content, that's an option. To find out how, please go to mybigfootsighting.com.
My Bigfoot sightings happened in Oregon and in California. My first Bigfoot sighting happened to me in the year 2000, and I was 11 at the time. We were currently living in Hesperia, California. It's in the high desert. We lived on a dirt street. Houses were pretty far apart from each other, about like an acre or so in width, and then about 3 acres deep. So they're good pieces of property. Our driveway was a massive U shape, so it was a good walk to get to the dirt street. Dirt street was pretty hard with like loose sand on top of it, so if you could slide pretty easily on it, so you could hear stuff pretty easily. So that'll come into play in a second after I kind of paint this scene for you. So there is one street light that is on, well, our street on the corner, and it's a good distance away, maybe 3 houses down. So I'm not good at math, but it's a good distance, not lighting up our property at all. It's just there for the corner of the street. So it was around 9-ish, and my mom asked me to go take out the trash. So I go take out the trash. Well, before that, I gotta tell you the yard across the street and then the yard next to my house where this thing ran out from. So across the street, there is an abandoned property with a little shack at the back, like classic creepy horror story. Nobody, since about 2 years I lived up there, not one car went into that property. Like no one ever lived there. So it's kind of that creepy house. Didn't want to mess with it. So it was very overgrown property, tall grass, bunch of these thorns on everything, little cactuses all over the place. I'm taking out the trash now. I got my slippers on. I'm out there taking the trash, and I look towards that light down the street looking for coyotes, because there's plenty of them eating all the cats and stuff. But I look to the right for the coyotes, and I hear sand being displaced. So I'm like, holy cow, there's a coyote right next to me. And I look over real quick, and there is this thing on 2 legs running kind of towards me. It's running diagonal toward the empty lot spooky house right across the street. And there's a 6-foot chain link fence surrounding that property. So when I snap my head over and I see this thing, and it's kind of shaggy. It was on 2 legs. It was a little taller than me, and I was kind of a tall-ish kid, 6 foot currently. So, yeah, it might have been like 4.5 feet tall. it ran like a person, but it ran really fast. And it actually does this. It didn't run like a chimpanzee because we're all really trying to figure out what this thing was after. But anyways, its arms swung back and forth. It didn't kind of rock side to side like a chimp or anything. It sprinted, and it actually put its hands on this embankment and did this push off kind of with hand and foot to get to the 6-foot tall fence. It was acrobatic feat, really. It was kind of like a ninja. And it hit the fence like hard. Like you could hear the rattling from the chain link. And then when it came down the other side, you could hear all the long grass and stuff smash down. But it didn't continue to run stuff over and break through the brush and keep running. It sat there. And that was my oh no moment. Eyes get all big, mouth drops open. I didn't even get the trash in the can. I just threw it towards it at that point and sprinted out of my slippers. And I get, man, I must have been flying. I get to the door and I slam it shut, lock it, do the classic turn around, put your back against the door and go, what was that? My parents are yelling at me now. They're like, why are you slamming the door? Crazy kid. And I'm like, there's something out there. And I just seen it and it ran and it jumped over the fence. And my dad was like, it was maybe a coyote. And I'm like, no way. This thing was running on 2 feet. It was kind of shaggy. It wasn't a person. It didn't run like it ran unnatural. Not like super crazy speed, but if it was running towards me, I wouldn't have been able to react fast enough to really defend myself. I wasn't thought about it after, but it scared the daylights out of me. I didn't go outside at night for a good while. That night, though, after I explained to my dad what I saw, my dad's a police officer, so he goes out there with his flashlight, and he's scoping the area, checking it out, Didn't see anything, but he did say he felt a little tense out there. Said it was a very eerie feeling out there. I didn't kind of maybe even think that could be like a juvenile Sasquatch or anything until way down the line. I read The Hobbit for the first time that year, so I possibly thought I was seeing some kind of goblin, to be honest. Like I thought there was a dang goblin living in that weird shed back there, and possibly could have been a Sasquatch looking. It was rummaging in the trash. It was trash night, so that could have been a thing. It could have, my parents were like, it could have been some crazy druggie trying to eat out of the trash can. And it didn't run like it ran like a person on 2 feet, swinging its arms back and forth, but it didn't. It was very creepy, very, very creepy. We did a lot of speculating there. It's in the high desert. It just gets really dark out there. So when I turned to my left, this thing was probably, thinking about distance now for, fine detail, because it was just black. Like I couldn't see any fabrics. I couldn't see anything moving off of it. Just looked shaggy. So it looked kind of thick, like something that short, almost looked like a squat dwarf or something, but like taller. I don't know. It had some meat on its bones. So I didn't think it was some crazy druggie out there eating trash or anything. So I was about 20-ish feet away. I was running diagonal, so it was pitch black. Couldn't make out a lot of detail. It was about 4-ish feet tall. So I mean, as detail goes, and I didn't smell anything. I'm trying to think of all the staples for bringing up minor details. I specifically remember the sand on the road just sliding with every step. It was like a good like just scraping and displacing and sliding. So like it was really weird to see it move. And then when it jumped off that berm, both hands touched the top of the fence first, and then its feet kind of followed it over. Like it was some gymnastic move or something. It was pretty interesting to see it kind of fluidly move over. But yeah, I think that's all the juicy details for that one. And I mean, that memory was so vivid and it stuck with me for a pretty long time. And as soon as the popular Bigfoot shows came out a while back, my dad was all over it. And, you know, I would watch too and stuff. And it took a while for maybe that to even click that it might be an encounter or a sighting. So that one was pretty unnerving, but it doesn't really hold a candle to this next incident or sighting that I had. So I moved to Oregon. It's 2016, and it was on the Windchuck River or stream, depending on the time of year, I guess. But this area has had, from just talking to other people, quite a few sightings here. And I was not looking for this sighting. I was having dinner with my buddy and his wife, and we ended up having our sighting. But I'll give you some backstory information to kind of, again, give you an idea of what this looked like and how the topography was at the time. It was pretty brutal winter. Like the winter that year, it rained a lot. I never thought I would be saying like, hey, stop raining, but I think it was 3 months straight, just rain, and the little stream is pretty much a raging torrent at this point. It was early spring when we see these Bigfoots. So I'm at my buddy's house for dinner. He lives on one street. I live the street above, so I can look down, see his house, and see a very small section of the river. And he invites me over for dinner. We barbecue and having a good time. He has a raging fire going in the house, so it's really hot in there. We get done eating, go outside to cool down, and the river's really, really loud in this small section of river. It kind of goes through kind of narrows a little bit, so you can hear the wind howl through it. The day before, kayak actually got swept up on the opposing side of the river, and my homie called me and he's like, hey, come down, check this out. You know, somebody's kayak washed up on the other side. You know, let's call it in, make sure somebody didn't get swept away, you know. And so there's that kayak on the other side of the stream. A police officer came and checked it out, and we're on the balcony or his back porch at my buddy's house, watching the officer retrieve the kayak and make sure, no one's hurt or anything. And someone just didn't pull it up high enough up the bank. And so that was good. Everybody was all right. But what was really fascinating is where the police officer was the next night. That's where we saw the Sasquatch. They were literally right where, but the encounter happened at night instead of day. So it was really, really strange. So the next night, having dinner, there is a extremely heavy cloud layer just sitting on top of the water. Like, it is pitch black. And I'm outside. Ron's checking the fire. His wife's out there having a smoke. And I start... Okay, I'm going to go back a little bit more because you could hear everything. There's a symphony of crickets. The crogs were going mayhem. Like, there was so many sounds because I think everybody was happy that the rain finally stopped. But anyways, it was a pretty brutal winter. But so it was really, really loud, really dark. And the sound kind of turns off, like switches. And it started from the left. Like, it turned off like one click. That section was quiet. The next section was quiet. And then right in front of us, dead quiet. Like, even the water, the wind, everything. And it was, you don't think about it at first. Like, it just kind of sat in really creepily. Like, it just didn't feel right. And she's having her cigarette. I'm out there trying to cool down. And I start hearing something in the water, like kind of like sloshing. I look over to her and I'm like, hey, you hear that too? And she's like, yeah, it's got to be like a beaver or something. I'm like, a beaver? Like slapping its tail? It's not slapping its tail. It sounds like a lot of trudging and a lot of sloshing. I don't know, but it was a lot of racket over the racket that was just happening. So it seemed very strange with the sounds. Ron was still inside. And then a little bit of eye shine started happening. And I'm not thinking Sasquatch at this moment. I'm thinking elk. Because his neighbor's house, this local herd or whatnot, they all bed down over there. That's just where they go. So I was like, could be a lot of elk moving through. That'd be cool to see. So I tell my buddy, hey, get a flashlight. I see some eye shine. The elk might be coming through. So my buddy grabs these flashlights, the big Maglite ones, the ones that double as clubs. He grabs 3 of those, one for each of us. And we start beaming. We pull up a couple chairs. And this is where it starts to get like downright spooky. We're all sitting together with our flashlights pointed out into the woods. And my buddy, he's to my right, his wife's to my left. And he's like, I see an eye. And I'm like, no way, dude. Like, what? And he's like, yeah, I see an eye. And I'm like crawling over him, almost sitting in his lap, trying to get the angle because he's looking around this tree. And he's got the angle on it, not me. And sure enough, this like orange, fiery, burning ember peeks out from behind the tree. And it like sucked in the light. It like almost glue, but like not like an artificial glow. It didn't really like shiny reflect like when a window or a car kind of catches the light like just right, and then it'll blind you for 1 second and then be okay. Kind of like a hard to explain, but I kind of like absorbed the light. Like, it was very weird. So we're looking at this one light pretty much, and I'm like, where's the other one? like, shouldn't it be attached to something? And my buddy, he's to my right, so he sees the next eye moving, like how a head would, doing that peekaboo. Very slow, very deliberate. The eyes didn't blink, though. Throughout this, they didn't blink whenever they were visible. They just were looking at you. Very unnerving. The tension was palpable. You could cut it with a brick. I don't know. It was scary. So the first set of eyes slowly receded back behind this tree. The tree makes up, on the other side of that tree, it's like a huge game trail. That's where all the elk and deer come into the yard and eat all the apples and Asian pears. They're living like kings. But so there's a lot of food, lots of food. And then so after the first set of eyes pulled back behind the trees, our mouths are wide open. We're like scared little rabbits, just like, what was that? Were those eyes? I mean, we repeated that sentence a million times. Like, what was that? Are those eyes? Like, and about maybe 2 or 3 minutes went by, and we're scanning the whole, as much as we could see on that side of the bank. The bank's not too far either. It's probably like 45, I'm going to say yards to the tree on the next side. That's a rough estimate. So half a football field, give or take. So you could see the eyes. They were separated. The height, whatever we were seeing, was not directly behind the first tree that was blocking its visibility, because the light penetrated the darkness, but not enough. These weren't super high-tech new mag lights like they have nowadays with, lasers built in or LEDs and all that. They just good old D battery flashlight. So it didn't penetrate that far. And the eyes did return. And actually, it seemed like a few different sets of eyes actually appeared. The next set of eyes that actually emerged were to the right. And it was underneath this fallen tree. And have you ever seen like your cat or your dog, and they like are under the table and they just have enough eyes to peek out from under and look you in the eye? They're like both at one time, kind of like your eyes drop under. That's what this set of eyes did. They both appeared at the same time. It wasn't like the slow reveal. They just went boop from underneath this log, and we lost our minds. We were like, what is that? And again, it's not illuminating the face that's the owner of these eyes, but they're glowing for sure, and they're like very menacing looking. Like they look like demon or dragon eyes. They're just like burning embers, like very, very unnerving. So every time it was a new shocker when those eyes would disappear. Another set on the opposite side. So we didn't think about our phones. I know this is another thing that like a lot of people bring up. It's like, why didn't you record this? And you're like, and I ask that too sometimes, like living life without your phone is how you should experience life, but these phones are pretty handy to capture on your super cool cameras. But anyways, so these eyes would appear here and there. We're losing our biscuits. Ron, in between one of these slacks of the eyes appearing, he gets up and he walks closer. He walks to our left. So before he takes off, tell you kind of how the back of the house is laid out. It's this raised deck that's kind of a wraparound the back side of the house. So wraps around the kitchen. There's a corner, goes down. There's master bedroom with the slider, and it goes around there. And there's a jacuzzi right outside the master bedroom, right there. And then on the other side of that, there's like kind of like a hedgerow or just a bunch of trees and stuff before the neighbor's house. So, kind of spread out, good, not cookie cutters, of course, but there was some shrubbery over there. So he gets up from my right, walks to the left, and close to the stairs that actually take you to the river, because he's got a little set of stairs that go down. I think there's around 12 steps on it. I'm not sure. But he goes to the top of the steps, and me and his wife are like, come back. You're going to die or something out there. Like we got really scared for him, but we're cemented in place, man. I was frozen stiff like a deer in headlights. Like, I was shocked at what we were seeing, and it was like hard to register. So when he got up and got close, I literally put my hands on top of my head and was like, oh no, don't go. And he went over there. He was probably only there for about a minute or so. And he came back kind of that hunched over kind of walk, like when you're walking underneath a helicopter, like that kind of like, ooh, 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 ooh. Hey, and a little quick step in his pep. And he came back and he sat down, and his eyes are kind of like very intense. I mean, we're looking pretty unnerved at the moment. And he's shaking up. I don't know what's going through his head at the moment, but I do find out why he's shooken up in a couple seconds. So Ron's talking, and his wife's on my left, and we both hear a big splash upriver, and it was a decent amount of size, but it sounded far off. Like, it was very faint. And she slaps me, I slap him, and we're like, did you hear that? Like throwing your arm out. I'm like, did you hear that? And he's like, no, I was talking. And then he starts hazing himself. He's like, oh, why was I talking? Why was I talking? Why was I talking? And so we get quiet again, and we're sitting there. It's like very, very, very quiet. Like, all the hairs are standing up, and a cannonball of a splash. I put my hands up to block what I thought the water, like, Shamu zone was coming to, like, get me, like, it was so loud. We all stood up in unison. The chairs, sliding kind of, because they're the, outside porch chairs. They slid out. We all stand up, and we're kind of like holding each other, like, oh my God, that could have hit us. And we're all saying that, and then Ron stops and he goes, they're gone. Like, it was the weirdest thing. After, like, we're not really even debating, if this is Sasquatch out there or how many are out there. He was like, they're gone. And so he instinctively knew there's multiple things out there without us even debating it right now. It was really weird for him just to instantly know. The atmosphere changed. The crickets and everything didn't come back online like instantly, but the atmosphere like changed. There was no more like tension in the air. Like it was electricity when it first started happening. Like, I was in my seat and I was not moving. I was so scared. It was, you think about these things, big events in your life after the fact, and try to rationalize and, analyze a little bit. Or I definitely revisited this sighting almost every day. don't live at that location anymore. I live probably 15, 20 minutes away from where that took place. So I'm so close, but so far away of having that sighting. But going back to when the actual sighting was wrapping up, he said they were gone. And I was like, what? How do you know? Like, what is happening? And Renee is saying she's the skeptic. She's like, no, that was not that. There's probably, reflector lights out there. The cops might have been back there, but we didn't hear any rustling around or any sticks breaking like when we were observing the police officer go over there and check this kayak out. He was stepping on twigs. He was all over the place. and it was muddy too. Like, wasn't a lot of undergrowth because it was, fresh out of winter, very early spring. It was just brutal winter. But another weird placement in their eyes. They're in kind of the middle of that sighting. Kind of the whole length of the sighting lasts around 45 minutes or so from tip to tail. So it was kind of a longer sighting seeing these eyes, but it happened so quick. We're just paralyzed with fear. But one of the eyes was actually placed up the tree a good ways. The tree wasn't shaking. There wasn't a hand around it or anything. So it was very odd to kind of see one of these eyes or lights up in the tree that high. And it was still a pretty good glow. Like, it was up there. We're panning kind of the shoreline. And then all of a sudden, there's one pretty far up the tree, but you can't see any arms around it. Tree's not swaying. I did see the one set of eyes came behind this one tree the most. The other times they kind of came out sporadically in random spots, but there was this one tree and we had all three mag lights pointing at it, and you could see a dark, an even more dark spot where the head would be. And it was really dark. Like, it made the other darkness look not so dark. So it was attached something. These lights were not floating around on like some strings or something. I'm still trying to figure out what could it have been. And with the rock throw or boulder, what's weird about it is, the trees are all the way up to the river. I didn't hear any branches break. This rock didn't come out. If it came out of the forest, it came out through a tiny window and landed perfectly. I'm just trying to wrap my head around it, how big of a rock. And there's no cliffs nearby. Like, there's a ridge, but you have to walk about 75 yards through this little glen. And then it climbs up to fire roads. This area is all privately owned. It's remote. To get on the other side of the river, you obviously got to go over a bridge. But on one side, it's his own bridge. Like, you don't go down that bridge to go anywhere else. You go down to his house. And then the other bridge is by this little end of nowhere street. But anyways, yeah, so like getting out to that location on the other side, you have to go on private property. You got to jump through a couple of hoops to get out there. But the neighbor even said, his neighbor where the sighting took place said, because we started poking around, see if anybody else has seen anything. And her and her husband were actually hearing what they thought was like chopping of wood out in the forest the previous nights. They're like, are they building something out there? And we're like, no, the guy that owns the other side, he's up there in age, so he's not out there in the middle of the night, hammering away on stuff. So very interesting indeed. So the next day, my dad's so mad I didn't get him during this encounter, but I couldn't even think about anything. I was just paralyzed with fear. So next day we're kind of like going, oh my God, what happened? Like, we can't cross the river to check out if there's any footprints or not, because the water was up so high, and we didn't get to the other neighbor to ask if call him up, to go on the other side and bother that old man. And so we waited for the water to come down about, I don't know, 5 days or so. This river drops really, really fast. So it was accessible in about 5 days. And we looked for prints, and anything that could have been prints were butchered by the deer stepping on them. So there was nothing worth taking photos of. And trying to think of anything else for that sighting. Yeah, we call that section of the river Bockwasp Beach. It's just the local tribe around here. That's their name for Sasquatch. Oh, when we were recapping about last night's events, Ron was like, "Oh my God," and that smell too. I'm like, "What? I didn't smell anything." And he's like, "Yeah, when I went and I walked over near the stairs, he's like, I smelled the worst smell ever. It was rotting garbage and hot, like meat that's been sitting out in the sun for a long time. Just something deathly." So we were in a windbreak, sheltered from the wind on his porch back there. So when he walked up closer to the river, he actually got into this wind tunnel we're kind of in a ridge, and the wind just pulls with the river. It howls. He got close to him, and it picked up their smell right into him. So I've been analyzing, like just kind of thinking about things in the orders they happened. Things got quiet. The water started turbulating and sloshing super hard. So perhaps they were crossing. I don't know how many of them. It was too dark. We didn't have the flashlights yet. One of them or two of them might have moved closer to us, to our left, without us knowing. And while the others totally distracted us with looking at us. And then who knows how close they were behind the jacuzzi. Maybe all we had to do was just turn our heads left and shine our lights on the other side of the house, and there could have been another set of eyes right there. Oh my dear, I would have lost it if that would have happened. Oh man, I would have Bugs Bunnied into the house. Just nothing but a cloud of steam and smoke coming off my wheels. So I think that's what could have happened, like being how things panned out on that evening. And, we weren't really looking for anything. It just kind of plopped on our lap. But a few days after that, we do set up a little camera trap up on one of these fire roads across the river on that little ridge that I spoke about earlier. So there's a down tree that goes over one of these fire roads. We had some freezer burned venison. So we tied that up real good and hung it about, I don't know, black bear couldn't get it. It was at least 11 feet up. I mean, I've hoisted it. I couldn't even jump and hit it and slap it with this massive machete I brought with me, for bushwhacking to get up there. So we have it looped up. We got 2 cameras set on it. They're your standard trail cam. One of them's on a tree facing the ridge, and the other one is on the actual trail at a foot wedged off the ground and aiming at the meat and the camera that's pointing at the meat. So there we got them checking themselves. So we let those run for about 3 days, and we go back up there and the meat's gone. We're like, oh, guess we didn't hang it high enough. And then we look for the bag that was in. And when we strung it up, I poked a couple holes with it to get the juices out so smells really nice. But we found the bag not shredded up any more than I already poked it. It was opened. There was no meat in it. And it was about 10 yards away from, it was a little further than that, and the cameras didn't get anything. One camera malfunctioned. It took a picture of my buddy's face, before he closed it, and then it just crapped out after. But the other camera, we got tons of deer, bobcat, the bear showed up, and it took 3 pictures of the bear, one kind of on its fours, one on its butt sitting up, and then one on its back feet, and it's trying to reach for it, but you can clearly see it, and it's out of its reach. Like you can see it. It can't get to it. It's looking up at it. It's like, oh, can't get that. Then the camera takes a picture of the rope. Bag's not there. And the rope, it doesn't really look hindered that much. It's just kind of slung in a loop. Kind of like the Christmas. I tied it really well. So when it got ripped out, it was just this nice little loop, I guess. I don't know if that's relevant or not, but it took a picture of just the rope. So we swung out, missed there on anything cool besides bobcats and stuff. But we're actually planning on doing a little hike back up through those fire roads again. And, just doing a little walk, like you just keep your eyes open and just appreciate nature. And then, you might see something or might hear something when I go out. That's pretty much my take on it. You just be quiet and listen. And so we had the camera trap fail. We had the eyes on the bank, and trying to see if I'm missing anything. I've heard a couple really strange howls. One of my favorite trails up here, it's an old redwood grove, and it's really, really majestic. It looks like straight out of like Endor or Fangorn Forest. There's just moss everywhere, and it's really tranquil, just absolutely beautiful. And I'm walking on this trail on probably the inside of it on the loop, and you just hear this really sorrowful like howl. Just, it was so like just this really deep but faint, had to be so loud, and it just kind of resonated up, and it was faint but loud enough that you could hear it. And I was like, yeah, all right, I hear something out there. There's no houses. This is where we're at. There is just woods. It's the Siskiyou National Forest. There's just woods out there. And then until you go like, I don't know, like 65 miles or so, and then you'll hit like Cave Junction or something, and there's nothing but woods out there. So when you hear something out in the woods, or see something, like, you got to just check all your possibilities. Like, I don't jump at everything and think it's Bigfoot. Like these, I'd say those 3 or 4 little incidences that I've had, they were really profound. There was just, they shook me up, especially the one when I was 11. Like, I was so scared. I couldn't watch any alien movies or Gremlins for a long time. I was spooked. My parents were like, hey, look, yeah, go play tag outside, or hide and go seek, at night. And I was like, no, not doing that. There's things out there. The night does conceal some pretty spooky stuff. But those are my sightings for now. Maybe I'll have more. Maybe I'll be ready next time. I don't think you can get used to that level of fear, being that close to the unknown, I think. So I guess on that note, call it a night. Have a good one. And thanks for having me on.
Well, that's it for tonight's show. If you've had a Bigfoot sighting and would like to be a guest, please go to mybigfootsighting.com and let us know. Thanks for listening. Have a great night.
Seen a bunch of rundown no-horse towns where the church is the backbone, loves in the plow, and the five-string melodies grooving, with the farmland rows where the roots run deep, beyond the noise of the busy streets, where the songs of the South are soothing. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah.